Welcome to Lead with Hope with Brandy Kelly, the podcast where we explore the power of hope, leadership, and resilience in today's world. Each week, we'll bring you stories, insights, and actionable advice from leaders, innovators, and change makers. So let's dive in and discover how you can lead with hope.
Welcome to the Lead with Hope podcast. Today, my guest is Craig Randall. Craig is the developer and author of Trust-Based Observations. He spent the last 30 years in education working as a counselor, a coach, a teacher, and a principal. Craig's mission is transforming the world of teacher observations to a model of trust and support that fosters growth mindsets, teaching innovation, and school-wide cultures of trust. Welcome to the podcast, Craig.
Thanks for having me, Brandy. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you today and to hear a little bit about your story. I heard about trust-based observations several years ago, and I think we even connected at some point. But to be honest with you, I never knew that you were a teacher, a principal, and you did all the other things in education. So I'm excited today to hear more about your story.
Well, I think my background professionally is a little bit eclectic. I started as an elementary school counselor and did that for 7 years. And then I did my 8th year as a middle school counselor in a classroom with severe behavior students. So I was like kind of teaching at the same time. It was a different era. I did restraint every single day of that year. And then as we do, we coach. And I detoured for 7 years into college basketball coaching. And I did that at a small Division III school as an assistant and then as a junior college. And then it wasn't quite rewarding enough on the people level. And that led to something my wife and I had talked about on our very first date was international school teaching. And so we ended up at the American School of Warsaw, and I was teaching PE. And the elementary principal there said, "Craig, I think you'd make a good principal." My first thought was the dark side, never. But then I was flattered, and I started the program. And really, that's where I met my mentor. And I was really actually frustrated with observations, even when they were done well, because you'd have an observation, they'd make suggestions. Then if you're lucky, you'd have another one. But no one would ever talk about what happened in the last one. It just never made sense to me. And I would tell people, and they'd go, "Yeah, I know, but it's just the way it is." So even I remember starting my program thinking, why am I even doing this? And the very first day in supervision class, my now dear friend and mentor, Warren Aller, said, "You have to be in classes every day. You have to be observing them. You have to be supporting them. You have to be pointing out their strengths. You have to be asking them what they were doing to help students learn. And you have to ask them what they might do differently." And it was the combination of the hallelujah and the light bulb all together. Mm-hmm. And that started me on a path of we would practice every single day in that class. So I've never even talked to one person I've talked to that practiced during supervision. And I got my first assistant principal job, and I said, "You have this crazy idea about observations." And then it just evolved and evolved and evolved until, I was telling you before this, I was at a school where somebody wanted me to share out what I was doing with other people. And the elementary principal after a while said, "Craig, you have to protect your work." And I didn't even know what he was talking about. And then he's like, "You've created something." I was like, "Oh, wow." And then I presented at a conference and it went really well. I thought, wow, I should write an article, then a book, and now I go and train schools all over the world in trust-based observations.
Wow, that's a fascinating story. And, I wonder, different schools have different cultures. And so some are more accepting, I'm sure, of changing and doing something that they've never done before. And then others might be a little bit more resistant to change. So to a school or to an administrative staff that is resistant to something like this, what would you say to them?
Do it, because it transforms your culture. What I'll say is I'll say this right now, the people that reach out for trust-based observations, those are innovators or early adopters. They're like, they read it and they're like, "Oh yeah, we have to do it." Or, "Oh, I heard about that. Really, I'm going to do it." So I don't think we're really at that stage yet. But if you're being held back because you're like, "Oh, I don't know, this is the system that's in place. Danielson Marzano's been the way it is for 25 years. I don't want to do that." the research shows it's not improving teaching and learning. The research also shows it increases teacher dissatisfaction. It actually, related to something you and I were talking about before, it lowers their sense of self-efficacy.
Yeah.
And so, and that's contributing to teachers wanting to leave the profession. So if I'm afraid of doing that, think about the harm that it's causing, and that it's not doing what we want. And why do we get into education? Because we want to make a difference in the lives of young people. So take the chance and do it. And I'm going to say one more thing about this is for the teachers in the schools, as soon as we start doing this, it transforms the culture of the school immediately, like within 1 week. Do you mind if I share a quick story?
No, please do.
Okay. So I was leaving an international school. So before we come to a school, people say, what should we tell them? We say, tell them you're adopting trust-based observations. We think they're going to like it. We're the ones on the hot seat who are learning how to do this new system. The only thing is that when we observe you, those that we do, there'll be a group of people with laptops. We know that won't feel comfortable, but as soon as we have the conversation, we know you're going to feel great about it. So we leave it fairly blank, vague like that. So I'm leaving an international school in Phnom Penh in Cambodia, because we do it all over the world, literally. And I'm walking out, and the superintendent and I are walking out. And at 3 different times, we come across a teacher who we had not observed that week, because you don't get to observe most of them. Mm-hmm. And all 3 of them said almost verbatim the same thing. And they all had the same wistful tone in their voice. They all said something along the lines of, oh, I thought you were going to observe me. So like, think about that. And in 1 week's time, people in essence are saying, no fair, I didn't get my turn being observed of all things. And that's a culture of trust in the school. And the reason that happens is as soon as the teachers start having the reflective conversations, teachers are gossips. And so 2 things happen at once. The person that had it said, you're never going to guess what it was like. Mm-hmm. And the people that haven't, they're all worried. So they say, what was it like? And the strengths-based nature of it feels so good to them that they want to be observed. And that just, it spurs growth. So
what you're saying is you use that natural tendency towards a more negative behavior, which is gossiping, to foster that strength-based approach, growth mindset, all of those things.
Maybe not to foster the approach, but we know the word will spread anyway. And we definitely change a more negative deficit mindset from a traditional graded observation to a strengths-focused one, and that makes such a massive difference in people's responses and their mindsets towards growth afterwards.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, teachers are naturally reflective thinkers.
Oh, I agree.
They consistently look at what they're doing and what they could do better. And I think, too, by nature, they are somewhat critical of themselves, right?
There are.
So this strength-based approach could really build them up, really foster their sense of self-efficacy, like you said before, and create a culture of trust in your organization.
Brené Brown talks about the connection between trust, vulnerability, and risk-taking. And the research says right now, the way that we do observations, grading, reduces relational trust. And that makes teachers play it safe. And Brené Brown says you lower people's vulnerability, which makes them comfortable to take risks. And it's the actions you take. Every single little action builds trust. And she has an analogy that like it's a jar and you're putting a marble at a time in the jar. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what we do is we just very purposeful actions and we take our time. We don't feel like we need to fix you right away. We want to build genuine trust with you. And it makes a huge difference in terms of the way that people respond. I just want to say one more thing too. Mm-hmm. I agree with you on teachers and their mindset, but I know there might be people listening out there that think, well, no, not all teachers. Yeah. And I want to say something about that. I think every teacher, when they started the profession, did have a mindset that was growth. But things along the way caused that to change. It could be things like the toxic way that we do observations. It could be things like maybe they had a bad administrator along the way that wasn't super kind and they've been traumatized. Maybe it's something in their personal life has happened. And so I do believe, and I see it happen with trust-based observations, that those that aren't like that anymore can rediscover that too. So I just wanted to add that because I think it's really important.
Oh, I think that's perfect. Yeah, because you're absolutely right. Our professional and our personal backgrounds shape who we are, who we become. And so putting something in place in our schools and in our lives that's going to foster that growth mindset can only be a positive.
It's not rocket science.
Right. It's amazing. Well, the next question that I have for you, Craig, is a question about which one of the letters from my Lead with Hope framework resonate most with you. H stands for habits, O for optimistic outlook, P for passion, purpose, and perseverance, and E stands for excellence.
I don't think that's a fair question to let me answer just one. So I'm going to address all of them just a little bit, okay? Because I think it's important. So I think habits, we use the word routines. Yeah. And like with TBO, you have to have a routine and do it the same way every single week, same number of visits every week. We function more effectively as human beings when we have habits or routines. It's just the truth. To randomize it, we just end up not being efficient. So I do think that's vital that we have that. You know, when you talk about an optimistic outlook, I do think we have to hope for the best for people and see the best in people. And sometimes we have to search harder to find the best in people. And admittedly, sometimes it can be hard. And on the rarest of rare occasions, sometimes a change has to be made. But you have to go about it with that outlook, and you have to go about it with a hope that doing our best, we can get that growth and change with people. I just think it's vital to that. And I'll maybe add one more O to that. It also means I have to maybe be a little more open-minded about it too, in order to make that happen. And then like passion and purpose, like I feel so lucky that like I am so passionate about my work and that it's a joy to get to do what I do for a living. Like people will say, when are you going to retire? I'm like, why would I retire? I get to hear people say amazing things every week when I'm on the road. How would golf ever be better than that? And so I think though, passion, purpose, and perseverance, I just think that which is also meaning it's believing in process.
Yeah.
It's not so much focusing on the end line, but knowing that if I keep doing what I'm supposed to be doing and keep growing it and growing it and growing it, like every week when we're on the road with trust-based observations, people will say, hey, Craig, have you thought about this? And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's brilliant. And we keep growing it. And it's just keep continuing to work on it. And so I just think all of that together, like if you can have something that means that much to you, it makes life so much more fulfilling. And I really think the excellence part, I think that's just the end result of all the other three to me. So I answered all four, not just one. I apologize.
Oh, that's perfect. No, you did it very succinctly and you hit the nail on the head. That was amazing. And I love what you said about excellence being the end result. But I would even go a step further and say that, is there ever an end result? Like with trust-based observations, we're never done. We're constantly evolving and making it better. But for me, what excellence is it's looking for those results, but each and every day being better than you were yesterday. Maybe the process is better. Maybe you as an individual is better. Maybe you as an organization is better. But it's just that consistent, thinking about continuous school improvement, it's just that continuous cycle of being better.
Lifelong learner. And I don't think in a drudgery like, I have to. And it doesn't mean you can't like enjoy and feel satisfied with accomplishments that you've had along the way or when you've had a little growth moment, because I think honoring those moments is really important. But like, I think sometimes when you have like models that have distinguished or excellent at the top, I think inadvertently, because I believe they're all well-intended, but inadvertently it sends a message that you've arrived. Right. And it almost works against exactly what you're talking about, that we do want to keep getting better. Yeah. And so I think whatever we're doing, I don't think we ever want to feel like we're a finished product, and not in a bad way, just in the like, there's more.
Absolutely. There's always something to look forward to. And, I think that fosters that purpose, passion, and perseverance, which to me, that could mean growth. That could mean growth mindset or grit. It's just that idea that we're going to face hard things. We're going to deal with difficult situations. Maybe as a teacher, you're dealing with trauma, and that constructive criticism, or maybe the system or the framework that your evaluator is using for evaluation right now is really triggering you, and it is not fostering that strengths-based perspective. And so, having an environment where you can have trust and you can talk about that and you can be vulnerable and take risks and share that.
I agree, and at the same time, you said the obstacles are so hard sometimes when we have these systems that are built in that work against what we're trying to do as leaders and as teachers, and it's just not easy when the system inadvertently causes you to turtle up and feel like you need to protect yourself, and there's a weird balance in there that until things have changed in your building, where there's a level of self-protection that's healthy and a level that's not. And I don't know what the exact answer for each person is, but you have to strive to find that and strive to, when you're in an environment that's not super strong, to focus on you more and try as best you can to not let that part that does beat you down.
Yeah.
Which is not easy and not really even fair to even have to ask, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's difficult. And, you see more and more on social media and in the news and a number of places, sometimes even in our schools, that morale is low, the climate is poor. People are striving to build that culture and that climate for the good of their teachers and their students. Yeah. And it's not easy because, change is hard, for one. And the thing that really keeps us stuck in our maladaptive routines or habits is fear. We're scared to try something new. We don't like what's happening, Craig, but we're scared to try something new because we don't know what's on the other side.
And I think, and I'll add to that, and like if we're talking, because that's my wheelhouse, is teacher observation, because of Race to the Top, all 44 of the 50 states made legislation that requires something like Danielson or Marzano. So how do I, until that legislation changes, how do I find a way to make that work? And there are ways too, though, that, look, does it require some finessing? It does, if I'm being honest, but there are ways you can build a strengths-based TBO style and still tick the boxes, as it were, for the required obligations until it does. And then you can experience your teachers changing and the culture changing in your school. But you have to overcome, as you say, your fear and be willing to take a leap, to take a risk. But if you knew, oh my gosh, if you could see, Brandy, every time we do an observation when we're training a school and we see 12, 13, 14 teachers every week, we ask the teachers afterwards, hey, now that you've had a round of this, what do you think? You compare it to other models if you want, but you'll see tears of joy because their strengths have been shared with them, because the system doesn't build that in. You'll see just like deep gratitude. You'll see shy smiles that their strengths were shared with them. And then even better than all that, I don't know if it's better than all that, equal alongside that is the number one thing they'll say is, because we focused on strengths just through one visit and we valued them, they'll say, I'm already thinking about what to get better at without you even saying anything. Like if people could just see one of those teachers say that, I think they'd say, well, heck, I'm going to do it, because if I could have that in my building, why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
And so that's the growth.
Yeah. And so many of our systems, they do focus on deficit thinking. And this totally focuses on the abundance mindset, the strengths-based mindset. So I think it is powerful just in the nature of the way you've set it up.
Look, I didn't know the research when I was doing it. I was just doing it. But you see it, and then you read the research afterwards, and it's like, of course, like there's a book called Trust in Schools that they studied Chicago public schools, actually your home state, and their research said that really that relational trust is central to academic improvement. And they said that it all boils down to this. As they said, relational trust reduces the sense of vulnerability, and that acts as the catalyst for change, because it creates safe spaces for teachers to be able to experiment, innovate, have things not go properly, and still feel safe.
Yeah.
Like right there, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And the way we're doing it right now, when I put a grade on you, doesn't do that. It makes me cautious, and it's such an easy flip.
Yeah. And it's optimistic. You're looking at the glass half full instead of half empty. And I am sure it does foster that sense of psychological safety in our schools and in our communities, and such a powerful observation system. So,
can I just add one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
It also models what we expect teachers to do with students on feedback, where the other systems don't.
Mm-hmm. And Craig, I'm glad you said that, because that's an interesting point that you make. Because sometimes when you step from being a teacher into administration, you throw all of those habits or routines out the window that you utilized with your students. And whether you are leading a meeting or you are doing professional development, there's a number of times that those very same skills that you had and that you used in your classroom as a teacher should be implemented as an administrator. But for some reason, we think that we put that by the wayside when we go to the dark side, as you said earlier.
I think sometimes it, like with the observation process, the system sets you up to do that. It may be against your better instincts. Mm-hmm. And I think I don't know what percentage, but there's a percentage that forget.
Yeah.
And then maybe they think they need to become the boss or what. I don't know the reasons why, but it's not the best path.
No, it's not. It's not. I think in most cases, looking at this through a strength-based perspective, whether you're talking about evaluations, you're talking about running a school, a district, what have you, a strength-based approach is going to get you further faster. And I think, tell me if I'm incorrect in this, Craig, but I've read somewhere that trust is one of the hardest things to get as you are working on your school's culture. And then if you lose it, it's even harder to reestablish.
So it's easy to lose it. And I think we have to be conscious of every single thing we say, everything we write in an email, because it is easy to if I work to fill that jar of marbles up, it can be one false step, and that's the elbow accidentally knocking that jar over. And I think when you've done that, maybe every marble won't fall out and you'll be able to put some back in the jar right away, but some slipped under that heater vent or under the couch, and you have to do that. But I'm going to argue that building it isn't that hard. Okay. I mean, but think about it. Like what I'm saying, in 1 week, you can get teachers saying, I want to be observed. Mm-hmm. Like that's a culture transforming in 1 week, and we see it happen all the time. Now, that's just one time through. We have to keep building it, and our process has to stay the same, and we have to stay strengths focused, and we have to be inquiry based and all that. But and maybe aligning to what your age, our habit has to be the same, and our routine has to be the same. But I think it can happen more quickly than we think it can if we have a system that we're using to guide our change.
Yeah.
Very purposeful, direct system, not just randomly. Like I'll read quotes regularly that like talk about relationships and trust, and on Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever it is, and it's fine, but where's the how?
Right.
Because that's the important thing, is the actions that we take. Yeah. We have to back those words, which are fine words, with how.
Right. And the how for me, like you kind of pointed to, is the habits, the routines. And I don't think we can forget about our systems, because as you have very aptly pointed out, we have systems that promote trust, and we have systems that by their very nature, they cause trust to deteriorate in our organizations. And but we get to change that if we so choose. We get to change that. It may not be easy, but we get to choose, and we get to do a lot of things in our schools if we have that open-minded mindset that is going to foster that sense of trust.
It's interesting because like on teacher evaluation, one of the big problems is that you're trying to do two things at once. You're trying to observe to support growth, and you're trying to evaluate. And since 1969, the clinical supervision people said, you need to separate those. In 1984, there was a study of teacher evaluation practices. And as they saw a pattern, they formulated a question: can one tool serve two purposes? And the results were no. Charlotte Danielson said most people consider them largely incompatible. Strong said they're mutually exclusive. The Gates Foundation report that said no improvement said that's one of the big problems. Yet for now 55 years, we've been trying to do the same thing. So that tells us a system for 55 years, and yet people aren't doing it. But we can change that system. We don't have to do it the same way we've been doing it.
Yeah, we have other options. We just need to open our minds and look at those options. So
take risk, like you said.
Yeah, taking risks. And it's hard because change is hard, but it's worthwhile. And I think, for a lot of these change efforts, it starts with a simple book study. And I know you have a book, correct?
I do, called Trust-Based Observations. Yeah.
Where can we get that book, Craig?
It's on Amazon. It's on, you can get it through my website, trustbased.com too, but Amazon.
Okay. So I think that's a great starting place for anybody that is interested in this. But to kind of wrap up our interview today, Craig, I'm wondering, is there a specific passion project that you're working on right now?
A new book. I've learned, before it was just me doing it on my own, or occasionally I had an assistant principal, and just being on the road the last 3.5 years training schools now, I've learned so much. And what's just Craig in practice is now, 100 or so other schools in practice. And I learn from the school leaders every week. And so trust-based observations has really evolved. And so it's really exciting now to be able to put the new version of it on paper. So
yeah. And that's just, like you said, the natural evolution of getting better and better all the time. So with the listeners, how can they connect with you following this podcast to learn more about your work?
They can, trustbased.com is the website. My email is craig@trustbased.com. And I will tell you, I get to watch amazing teaching. As I see all gamuts, but we started actually interviewing the teachers it's like 20 minutes of just because our observations are 20 minutes. So if they also want, they can listen to that podcast, which is called 20 Minutes of Teaching Brilliance on the Road with Trust-Based Observations as well. And you can really learn from other teachers about great practice. Yeah.
Now, you bring that up, and I have to ask, I hate to put you on the spot, but I'm wondering, do you have research or statistics of like a pre-post, like before trust-based observations and after trust-based observations, what the outcomes look like?
What I'll say is we're too new to have had longitudinal studies, obviously only being, with COVID and everything when it came out. What I tell you is I get anecdotal evidence from people all the time. People that have done, there was a school in Denver that their culture shot way up to the top of the whole 200 school district. School leaders will say the difference in practice is it's like nothing short of remarkable. So it's anecdotal at this point, but we get culture and people telling us the change is my teachers are so much more reflective now, just all the time. So, but what we hope is at some point, one of these big organizations just want to say, hey, let's go explore that. And we can get that long-term data as well to back it up.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I appreciate you coming on today, Craig, and keep up the great work. And I look forward to staying connected with you.
I do too. Thanks so much, Brandy. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at teachbetter.com/podcasts, and we'll see you at the next episode.